Hi, my name is MITSI B KRAL and I'm a professional watercolourist, and I've been painting in watercolour for around 30 years or more. I paint in a really free, loose, expressive style, I suppose you could call it. I wanted to share all my knowledge and experience with you so you can also enjoy painting in watercolour in a free and expressive style. This is what we're going to paint. It's going to be a very free and loose poppy painting where I show you all my tips and techniques I use to create beautiful textures and interesting effects, and you'll end up with a beautiful poppy and also learn lots of interesting ways to create texture and effects. Hi, I'm going to show you how to paint a poppy, just a common poppy, not an oriental poppy or anything like that. Just a plain poppy that grows in like a cornfield or whatever. So I'm going to just talk you through the supplies I've got 140 pound, this is Bockingford paper. I've got something on the front, but I'm going to paint on the back. Try not to paint on the back of watercolour paper because it doesn't always work very well. And always try and get the best watercolour paper you can. Try and get 140 pound weight or above. So it's not, as you can see, this is nice and thick and it holds a lot of water because I paint with a lot of water, so you don't want the paper to start buckling with the water, and you don't really need to stretch the paper as well, which is a good thing because I hate stretching paper. What else are we going to need? We're going to need some water. I've actually cleaned my water for a change. Now I've got a brush. It's a round brush with, this is a sea white sable brush. It's a number 12 round, so any round brush will do. It doesn't have to be sable, it can be anything as long as it goes into a nice point at the end. When this is wet it forms a nice point, and it also holds a lot of water, which I like. I've got a palette here. I'm just using a paper plate for this, so I make it a bit simpler, as I like to say, for your viewing pleasure, because let me show you how I normally paint this. And I know a lot of beginners with watercolour wouldn't be able to cope with that, but this is my sort of palette set up, and I have about 3 of them that I work from, which they all look like this. But when you get better you'll probably have your own way of painting and set up things. Now the colours I've got, they're all watercolour tubes, and I try and use Artist watercolour tubes, but the Winsor & Newton cotton watercolours are quite nice. So I have a mixture. I don't prefer one brand against another really, but saying that, I do love Winsor & Newton, and I also do like Daniel Smith's watercolours, the ones that give the really nice grainy texture. But that's something you don't really have to worry about. Just buy what you can afford, and you don't have to have all the colours that I've got. You can use all the reds that you have and things, because it doesn't really matter. So for a poppy they are red, so I have pulled out a few reds that I like to use. This is a cotton watercolour, Azilian Crimson, so I'm just going to put a blob on my palette. And the next one is a sienna, I never pronounce words properly, which is a bright red. You can use Winsor red, which is a similar colour. And I have a Daniel Smith's Pearl Scarlet. and I have a Mission watercolour, which is vermilion, which is a nice orangey colour. Oops, a bit much. I always tend to squeeze out more paint than I actually need, and I'm just going for one green here, and quite a lot of greens are too green, if that makes sense. Not, or they don't give a natural green. This is a Mission olive green, which I quite like, and I knock it back by mixing some of the red into it. All my colours will merge into one another on the paper as we get painting, so don't worry too much about all that, and don't be worried about squirting too much onto your palette, because watercolour, you can reactivate it with water, and the same, you can add extra as you go. We will also need some water soluble pencils. I have a Faber-Castell one here, which is an Art Grip Aquarelle pencil. It's black, and I also have a Koi Noir Progresso Aquarelle watercolour pencil, and that's just the red. You can use any water soluble watercolour pencils that you like. I find the cheap ones are quite good for how I use them as well, so just any one, you don't have to have the same as I have. And with that, you will need some sandpaper. I've got quite coarse sandpaper here. You can also use a nail file, and I thought I might sort of, I'm not sure if I'm going to use this, but I might do. This is don't take any notice of what this is. This is not what it says on the bottle. This is black drawing ink. I put it, oh gosh, slap bang. I have, it's this. I have a huge bottle, but I like to put it, dispense it into a little bottle so I can use it easier, because if I like to squirt things straight onto the paper, and if I use this, it'll just, it will be a big mess. So I've got that, and I'm not sure if I'm going to use these either, but you'll probably see me using these quite a bit in my watercolours. I might try it and use it so I can explain what I am doing with these. These are little squirty bottles with a little nozzle on the end. This one has soap, hand soap, which I've grated a bit off, and I've put it into the squirty bottle with water, and I use that, squirt it onto my page, and it gives a nice texture and pushes the paint around. And in here I have a bit of household cleaner diluted with water, so I think it's Flash kitchen cleaner, which has bleach in it, so it's very dilute mixture. Again, I might not use this, but I might try and show you what happens. And I also got some salt. Oh, it's normal sort of kitchen fine salt, that. So I think that's all, and I've made my paper dirty. I think that's all you need for this. And I've got a photo for you to look at. When you paint anything, please go and look at the structure of the flowers. Go and look at loads of different poppies. The best poppy for you, the best way to look at flowers is for you to actually see them in real life. I grow them in my garden, and here is a lovely video of some that I had in my garden this year, and actually they are still blooming out there, because they do flower right up to October, from June to October. A nice fact about poppies. And I just love them, and I paint them a lot, as you've probably seen. Anyway, I shall stop gabbing, rabbiting, whatever you like to call it. And I will start for you. I start off by getting my brush nice and wet. Loads of water. I hope you can see this. And I'm just going to paint one poppy and a stem, just really simply for you, and I'll try not to make it too complicated. And I do paint really quickly and wet on wet, so it might look really fast to you, but you can slow it down on the YouTube controls if you need to. It's the little wheel in the corner if you see it on a PC or a Mac or whatever. And if you're watching it on mobile, there's 3 little vertical dots in the, let me think, in the little 3 little dots. I think they're vertical or horizontal, something like that, in the top right hand corner. And if you click on those, you can slow and speed up the videos, so which is a good thing. Right, I'm going to start off by let me see, slapping down a big pool of water, which is loads of water. It's like if I picked it up, it would just flow everywhere, so it's a big pool of water. Don't be afraid to put too much, because, oh yeah, I forgot to say, you need paper towel. Don't be worried about putting too much water on your page, but you don't want it so it just swamps. I hope you can, I'm not sure if you can see, if it's catching the light or not, how much water I have. And then I just sort of let it soak into the paper a bit. And if you have good quality paper, it's not going to start buckling too much and stuff, so it should be okay. Now I'm going to activate my watercolours by just dropping in some some water. So I'm going to get all 3 colours. I don't worry about them all merging in together because that's what I like. Now I'm going to start off with the lightest one, which is the vermilion colour, and the is it the Daniel Smith's one which I put there, something like that, or the Mission one? Oh, I forget, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to drop in some colour and just let it do what it wants to do. And I just call this blobbing in. Just sort of make sure it's in like this would be the silhouette shape of a poppy, if you think of the shape without any detail. And that's what I'm going for. And I just like to let it sit there for a bit. And then I will add, this is the Daniel Smith's darker red, which is quite grainy, and it does tend to push other colours away like that, you see. And the more you get to know different paints, you will know how they react. So it comes with experience, and I do have quite a bit of that when it comes to watercolour, so I sort of know what happens. So just be warned that some paints push other paints out the way, some pull them in, so it's fun. You don't know what's going to happen. The Daniel Smith one does like to take over, as you can see, and it's pushed the colours out. And I'm going to enhance that pushing of that colour with my bottle, with my, I suppose it's I think it's got bleach, diluted bleach, and I'm just going to drop a bit in the middle, and that does the same thing. It pushes the colour out because I want to keep the centre of the poppy quite light, so I can put in the dark, if that doesn't make sense, but it's the way I like to paint. And now, saying that, I'm going to come in with dark, and because it's bleach, it's going to make the ink lighter because it bleaches it out. But I'm just going to do that. That's for the dark centre of the poppy, and I might add a bit more of this in the middle, and it will push it out a bit further as it goes. And then I'm gonna, this is the soapy one. You can see, oops, that's not supposed to happen. It's not supposed to be in blobs like that. It's got stuck up the end. I haven't shaken it. It will blob it. And then if you splash in some water, just let the colour do what it wants to do. I've got quite a lot of water in the middle there, and I'm going to come in and blot it slightly because I want it to be dark, but not too dark. And I love the way it's just all flowing like that. Then what I will do, I will encourage that to flow out by dragging the paint with my pencil. And then I also do some frilly leaf patterns with my pencil. I'm just holding it right at the end so you get a nice flow. And just, I drag the paint and the ink and everything. And then I'm going to come in with my paper towel and blot out where I think the light catches the petals, which is sort of on the edges, and you can create the folds. And if you scrumple it, it creates a nice papery feel to the poppy petals. Now I'm going to come in with the Azilian Crimson, which is a darker red, and I'm just going to drop it in places where I want it to be a bit darker. And also I'm going to add some brighter reds in as well, because with all the blotting and everything you do, it does sort of make the paint not so bright. And whilst that is wet and doing its thing, I'm going to mix my green. You can see how green that is. And I'm just going to get a little bit of Azilian Crimson and mix it in, and it dulls it down a bit. And I'm going to just draw in a line for the stem. Don't worry about the red merging in. I like that. I think it looks quite nice. And oh, something that I didn't say we would need is a you can use a toothpick, bamboo skewer, or what I'm going to use is, excuse me a second, a dip pen. And if you look at a poppy stem, it's got these fine little hairs on it, and if you just use the dip pen or skewer or anything you have, you can just give a suggestion of a few hairs. Don't get too carried away, because I know it's tempting. Now I'm just blotting out a bit of colour. That black did take over quite a bit, but I'm going to embrace it. I like happy accidents, so I just let things sort of do what they want to do. You might need a lot of paper towel, just saying. And I'm just going to add a little bit of green to the centre in here, just to add a bit of colour. And as the sheen goes off the watercolour, the paint, as it starts to dry, it starts going a bit duller. And if you drop in just plain water at this point, it will create those lovely washbacks, cauliflowers, whatever, people have different names for them. But the paint has to be just slightly drying for it to work, and it doesn't always work on every colour. Some colours you use, it would give a more dramatic effect, and others it would be a softer effect. And I love this effect, and I use it a lot on my wet and wet. I just let it all go in, and if you get big pools of water like that, you can get some paper towel and just mop up a bit of the water. I don't always like to use a hairdryer when I paint. I do after I've let it settled for a while, because I like to let it all merge in together and do what it wants to do, and let it dry naturally. this pencil's got a bit wet at the end, and this effect won't work that well, so make sure the end's really dry on your pencil. And I'm going to get the sandpaper, and in little areas where it's wet I'm just going to sand my watercolour crayon, and that gives a nice little effect there. I'm trying to add all the effects I can. This works really well for the centre of the poppy. You know, it has a really dark centre, which I'm going to try and sort of draw in here. I don't know if you can see very well. It'll probably show up more when it's dry. My black's taken over, and I like to use the black crayon to create the little stamens of the poppy. As you drag a sharp object over wet watercolour, depends on the drying stage. If it's still quite wet and you drag a sharp object over it, it will take away the colour. Sometimes if the object's quite sharp and you make an indent in the paper and the watercolour's wet, the colour will run into, sort of, you can see here, into the area and create a nice line. And sometimes you can just draw over it. So it depends on the stage that the watercolour's dried. I think I went a bit OTT with the black ink in the middle there. I shouldn't have put so much in, but as poppy. And as I was saying, the I forgot what they're called now, stamens in the middle of poppy, they drop the black pollen, and I like to use a black pencil and just try and emulate the pollen that's blown everywhere. Now that effect will only stay where the watercolour's wet, so you have to work quite quickly and not let your watercolour dry so much. Now I'm just going to blot out and draw in. And I think I'm just going to let that dry and we're finished. Oh no, hang on. I thought, as I'm adding all my effects in, I thought I'd add a bit of salt. Here you have to put this onto wet paint, and it creates like a crystal-y effect because the salt draws in the water and it affects the drying time. So I will just sprinkle a little bit over here on this side, and we will come back to it when it's dry and you can see the effect. Now just let your watercolour dry naturally and we'll come back to it when it's dry. Okay, I've let this dry completely now, and you can see all the details in it. You can see the detail that the salt has made, and the little splashbacks where I dropped in water, and the effect I did with the sandpaper and watercolour pencil, and the little hairs on the stem. But one thing is that I sort of added a bit too much black ink in the middle, and I didn't blot it out quick enough, so I didn't catch any highlights. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with a watercolour pencil in a light green, and I'm going to try and rectify this so we haven't lost all the light. I'm just sort of drawing in this shape, blending it with my finger. Fingers are good, and I might even draw some of the stamens in that colour as well, and just add a little bit of green to the stem to just blend it all in. And although that's sort of picked out some of the highlight, it hasn't got everything, so I'm going to come in with a white pencil. This one doesn't really show up too well over the black ink. You can use any white. It's always a nice thing to rescue white. And hopefully that will just pick out the centre of the poppy and make it sort of sing a bit. Well, I've smudged everything there. So that's a really simple way to paint a poppy. Have a go, and if you like this, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you. Bye.